Obviously, this harkens back to all the other major campaigns as we've seen over the last, I don't know, 8 years, not Pecha Pecha, it goes on and on. So it's not a short-term thing. This is a long-term, this is gonna be months probably to work through this. And so from our perspective, we're focused on, the perimeter, those internet-facing applications, looking at, what our exposure is, peeling that back, and then looking internally second on if there's internal applications that are vulnerable and getting those remediated, working with our key partners. And then also looking across our third parties. What is their exposure? What is our connection? Do we have a B2B connection with a third party? Are they vulnerable? If so, how? Understanding that second, third order effect. And so this is not a quick process. It is, one, it's good to be in a small bank. My colleagues at Bank of America, JPMC, Goldman, they're in absolute panic mode. They've been 24/7 since Thursday.
Yeah.
And so, it's good to have a smaller footprint, but nonetheless, you still have to go through the basics. You got to understand what your exposure is, and you start from a risk-based perspective, and you address the closest alligators to the boat, quite honestly, that you got to fight away. And then you work methodically through the rest of the enterprise after that. And so that's what we're actively doing right now, working through that framework.
Great. Yeah. Christine, how about you? And, in terms of some of that, they're addressing a little bit of the near term, what you got to get done now versus the long term. How do we monitor what kind of exposure we might have already seen or experienced?
Yeah, I want to first start by building on what Ron opened with here, and again, I want to lens this against an industry perspective, right? I think we're all asking ourselves, what is it that's novel about this, right? Those of us that have seen WannaCry and Spectre and Meltdown and a litany of highly significant vulnerabilities in the last 5 years to major industry and cross-enterprise impact. So in this particular case, I think it's rather difficult to argue that it's the permeation of systems, software stacks, and frankly, usage and adoption, right? I mean, this is enormously used, cross-present, omnipresent, I would say. You're going to be hard-pressed to find institutions that don't have at least some remediation activity tied to this particular effort. And I think that's definitely something noteworthy, if not exactly unique. In terms of trends for remediation, and I would very much welcome Jacob's perspective on this in particular, but I think you're seeing folks, go through some of the same old struggles, right? You're producing regexes that might sit at the device level, and you're missing the latest variation or mutation, right? So thinking larger, going back to your asset inventory, looking to your hygienics, thinking about protocol level interdiction, patching as furiously as you can. I think generally speaking, you need to be looking broad. So to the surprise of perhaps no one, the slower you move, the more flat-footed you are, your risk compounds, right? And I think that, again, time is of the essence here. And I think thinking at that macro interdiction level is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacob, I know Cybereason actually released a vaccine for the vulnerability, I think within a day or two, that was freely available. What are you all seeing?
Yeah, that's correct. We did release that. It's kind of an alternative to patching. It's an interesting way to solve the problem, which is use the exploit for your own gain instead of allowing the attackers to use the exploit. There's a thing we can basically do that takes the exploit, and then by using the exploit, we render it useless. So that's one way to solve the problem without having to necessarily have downtime related to patching. From our perspective, anytime something like this happens, we're immediately under scrutiny. All of our customers ask, are we affected? Are our security systems? The first thing that we care about really is, are the systems we're going to go use to figure out how to solve this, are they affected? Fortunately, we're in the boat that wasn't affected in this case after we did our analysis of what we have deployed. And Apache isn't really one of the things that we lean on heavily for our web infrastructure. But it goes to a really good point, I think, that was just made. A lot of this isn't necessarily something that's new. A lot of this is fundamentals. It's inventory. It's where are things deployed in my environment? How are they deployed? But the reality is, as much as that's a fundamental that we've been trying to get right since 1992. When was the first time someone said there should be inventory of systems you maintain in your cybersecurity book. We still haven't really got that right. So the next question immediately is, how do I find where this is in my environment? And then who are the partners that I can leverage to find this in my environment? And what does that look like? And how long is that going to take? And when am I going to have an answer? So when we're on the vendor side, those are some of the questions we hear as well, is what can you do to help me solve this? Because I'm getting pressure. Am I affected? And I don't know the answer.